You know, when we think of artists, we usually picture painters or sculptors, right? Well, today in this explainer, we're going to be talking about an artist whose medium was literal earth. We're looking at how a quiet, totally understated engineer managed to completely transform classical golf architecture. It is an amazing story about how a perfect blend of technical precision and artistic vision created some of the most enduring courses in America. Because, as we'll see, true mastery often happens quietly, just out of the spotlight.
Now, it's super common to think of engineering and art as two entirely different worlds, right? Like one is cold and calculated, and the other is fluid and inspired. But honestly, that's a false dichotomy. Precision doesn't stifle creativity at all. It actually provides the robust framework that allows great ideas to stand the test of time. Keep this deep, symbiotic relationship in mind as we go, because it is absolutely the foundation of Seth Raynor's genius.
All right, let's get into it. Section 1. The engineer steps up.
So picture this. For years, Seth Raynor is the guy quietly surveying landscapes, studying famous holes, and just absorbing all these lessons from the sidelines. His mentor was C.B. Macdonald, the visionary who basically sparked the whole strategic revolution in American golf architecture. Well, when Macdonald eventually decided to take a step back and reduce his workload, the whole golf world was wondering who's going to carry the torch. And the answer was his quiet, dedicated engineer, standing right next to him. But Raynor had a massive mountain to climb. He had to prove he was a master in his own right, not just some capable assistant executing somebody else's vision. He had to prove his engineering mind could produce actual architectural art.
Which brings us to Section 2, a portfolio of masterpieces.
And wow, what a portfolio it is. You've got to see how broad his capabilities really were. He adapted to wildly different landscapes, from the epic coastal cliffs of Fisher's Island to the gentle terrain of Camargo, the lake shores of Shore Acres, all the way down to the low-country oaks of Charleston and the forests of Yeaman's Hall. The really remarkable thing here is how he adapted to these crazy distinct terrains without ever losing his core strategic philosophy. He definitely didn't just copy and paste his work, he literally let the unique ground dictate how his strategy would be expressed.
For instance, let's zoom in on Fisher's Island Club for a second. This place is perched on a narrow island off the Connecticut coast, sitting high above the sea. Now, most architects would have simply let that breathtaking, dramatic scenery completely dominate the experience. But Raynor, no way. He refused to do that. Instead, every spectacular view supported a strategic question. Those intimidating, sweeping views of Long Island Sound actually became both the guide and the challenge. The fairways invited bold lines, the greens rewarded thoughtful positioning. It's just endlessly engaging because the beauty never eclipses the game itself.
Now, totally flip the script and look at Shore Acres on Lake Michigan. Completely different application of his philosophy. Here, it is all about balance. The routing flows entirely naturally across the property, perfectly using the changing winds and those subtle shifting elevations. Rather than overwhelming you with visual noise or crazy hazards, Shore Acres just quietly invites you to think. It's architecture built on pure confidence instead of flashy spectacle. Nothing feels forced.
Oh, and we absolutely have to mention his work on the Yale golf course. People usually associate this one with his mentor, Macdonald, but actually it was Raynor's incredible technical expertise that brought those wild conceptual sketches to life. Those enormous bunkers, the super dramatic shaping, every single detail required immense engineering precision to actually build. It's a literal monument to what imagination and engineering can pull off together, turning a rugged piece of land into one of America's boldest collegiate courses.
Moving right along to Section 3, redefining the ideal holes.
Just like Macdonald, Raynor totally embraced the strategic ideal holes inspired by Scotland, but he made them entirely his own. Take his interpretation of the Biarritz Green at Camargo. It features this massive green divided by a crazy deep swale that basically turns distance control into absolute art. It stretches so dramatically across the landscape, proving that really subtle architecture can produce insanely demanding strategic depth.
Then there's the Raydan. Raynor literally sized these up. His versions were distinctly larger and way more boldly contoured than what came before him. These holes are designed to ruthlessly punish careless approaches and definitely ruin a few scorecards in the process, while massively rewarding thoughtful strategy. You couldn't just hit the ball and pray. You had to calculate the bounce, the roll, the whole shebang.
And his cape holes? Pure psychological warfare, I'm telling you. These were not just simple copies of older designs. His capes actively tempted even the strongest, most confident players with massive risk and reward over a hazard. It really showed his growing confidence as a visionary. He knew exactly how to bait a golfer into making a really bold, potentially disastrous decision.
But when you put it all together, his true signature was definitely his greens. Broad, bold, and incredibly complex, without ever crossing the line into unfair. And here's the kicker. Modern architects literally still study them today. Why? Because those subtle contours reward planning and punish sloppiness just as effectively right now as they did 100 years ago. Technology, clubs, balls, they've all changed tremendously, but good design for sure hasn't.
This leads us to Section 4, the invisible architecture. Now, to truly get why Raynor was such a genius, we actually have to look beneath the grass. If you ask what truly cemented his legacy, like what makes a Seth Raynor course survive and thrive for a century, the answer is something golfers almost never notice when they're walking down the fairway.
His greatest strength was engineering the invisible. Because he was an engineer first, he totally mastered the unglamorous foundations. We're talking the drainage, the grading, the construction, the core infrastructure. He profoundly understood that beautiful golf begins below the surface. His courses have aged so incredibly well because they were built with just extraordinary technical care. He didn't just paint a pretty landscape, he engineered a durable, functioning ecosystem that lets great architecture survive for generations.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, a quiet, lasting legacy.
This perfect synthesis of art and science really defines Raynor's final chapter. You know, unlike a lot of famous figures in the sporting world, Seth Raynor rarely sought the spotlight. He'd way rather be out walking properties than giving speeches. He preferred solving really complex design problems over talking about his own brilliance. His satisfaction came purely from seeing people enjoy his meticulous work. It was just this quiet humility that defined his whole career.
But that quiet humility, it completely lives on, woven right into the fabric of his courses. 100 years later, his layouts are literally still asking golfers the exact same timeless, strategic questions every single round. Let's look at how he challenges the mind.
Question 1. Where should you play? Raynor rarely built those narrow, suffocating fairways. Instead, his massive landing areas constantly demand that you choose the perfect angle. Just being in the fairway isn't enough, you have to be on the correct side to actually access the pin. It constantly forces you to think 3 steps ahead.
Question 2. How much risk deserves reward? His hazards aren't just decorative sandpits. They are placed so perfectly to tempt you into bold decisions. They make you weigh your confidence against the actual mathematical probability of the shot. Do you play it safe, or do you take the aggressive line over the hazard for an easier putt?
And finally, can strategy defeat power? Round after round, his architecture proves that careful thought, precise angles, and distance control will always outsmart pure, mindless strength. You simply cannot overpower a Seth Raynor course. You have to outthink it.
Any great architect can leave behind a memorable hole, but the absolute finest architects, they leave behind memorable ways of thinking. Seth Raynor left us with a masterclass showing that engineering and artistry are absolutely not opposites. When you combine them, they create a legacy that can last forever.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As you explore the world of design, whether you're on a golf course, looking at a building, or using a new piece of technology, are you only going to see the surface-level art? Or will you start looking for the invisible engineering, that hidden precision that actually makes it endure? Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you in our next explainer.